Well, hello and welcome to a very special episode of Stand Up. I don't know why it's very special. It's just, we got a really big name on today's program. Jon Filipowski is joining me. He is the editor-in-chief of MeidasTouch.com. He's the co-host of Uncovered. He's an attorney, a Marine, a former federal and state prosecutor, Republican Party insane asylum escapee. He describes himself. You can learn more at MeidasTouch.com. You know Ron. You follow him on Twitter. He's got almost 1 million followers there. He's one of the most influential people on social media, in all of political social media. I think that's fair to say. And I had a great discussion with him. Really happy to finally have gotten him on the program. We covered a lot of ground, and therefore I did not do a news segment today. Not only because I had an almost hour-long conversation with Ron, but guess what? I got invited out on Tuesday night. I decided to actually take up an invitation to socialize with other humans on a weeknight. I mean, I do it every Thursday with many of you at our hangout, and I look forward to seeing you this week, but not normal during another school night. But I decided to take it easy and not do a full news segment for this episode only. Usually I do between Monday and Thursday. I know you appreciate that and have been very vocal about it, so thank you very much. But this conversation is just with me and Jon Filipowski. I talked a little bit about his career, his life, how he has evolved politically, and what role he sees for himself in this crowded field of media. Ron is, it turns out, a really cool guy. I love this conversation, and I'm really happy that he joined me and that I get to share it with you. Please let him know that you heard him here. I mean, he's got so many mentions probably in his social media, he may not even see it. But if you're not following him, give him a follow and let him know that you heard him here on Stand Up. Ladies and gentlemen, for the first time ever, Jon Filipowski.
All right. Oh, my God. Look who it is. It's Jon Filipowski. He's a real person with like a body and a head and a voice, not just a social media monster. Ron, thank you so much for joining me. Big fan. My mom's a big fan.
Oh, really? Well, that's good. Good. I like that.
Yeah, she's going to be really impressed that I was able to get you on. She's always sharing stuff that you say. Everybody always is. You've become a really very influential guy. And how do you like your new life, by the way, as this very influential guy, literally, arguably taking down, or certainly creating a lot of problems for people like Ron DeSantis and so many others, Trump and many others?
Well, I didn't plan it. You know,
Right.
it really just happened organically out of the 2020 campaign, when I became this, Republican who is openly supporting Biden, a former party official. So, yeah, it just kind of took on a life of its own into January 6th and all that stuff. And when I first went on Twitter, I first went on Twitter during the summer of 2020. I had never been on social media. And I specifically put on there, like, I'm only going to do this until the election. And on election day, I'm deleting my account and I'm getting off. Well, obviously that didn't happen.
Well, because you were very effective and popular and people liked what you were saying. But I mean, it wasn't, as you said, your job. I mean, tell me a little bit about your career as a lawyer. I mean, you've done a lot of things. You've been a very successful Little League coach. You were apparently a teacher at the police academy, a Marine. I know you're not supposed to say former, but you're a Marine. Like, you've had a lot of different careers. You got 5 kids. You're married. Like, it's been quite a. But I want to ask you about your career track.
Yeah, well, I guess I've done a lot of different things, and I think that sort of does help me on social media and politics. The fact that I was also a high school history teacher, so I've done a little bit of everything. I was a federal prosecutor, state prosecutor, police academy director. Yeah, so lots of different stuff. You said,
just on that real quick, I didn't realize that, but I've got all kinds of notes here. But Ron, you're a high school history teacher in Florida.
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
How did you think about slavery? Did you teach slavery?
I taught African American history, was one of my classes, and which is kind of funny because DeSantis just, disbanded some of those courses.
What do you think of that?
I think it's completely outrageous. I mean, I'm familiar with the book that he wrote a dozen years or so ago about the founding of the country. And I've read many excerpts from that book, and his view of U.S. history is just completely warped. It's completely twisted. And I think that he would probably disagree with a lot of what I taught in my African American history class.
And are you open to like disagreeing about history? I mean, there's all different types of interpretations of history, right?
Yeah, sure. But I think the whole point of that class is that there's so much of that part of that's really U.S. history is what it is. It's just a huge part of U.S. history that's not taught in standard history classes. And that's really the main issue. When you start doing away with those courses under the argument that DeSantis uses, like, well, we already cover all this in U.S. history. It's completely ridiculous because all of my students would say, well, we didn't know any of this stuff. It's just the other side.
The danger it creates, it's like, as you talk about it, you're more of an expert almost than anybody in the country on media, social media, especially Republican social media, and understanding that it's not just Republicans, obviously, though we get siloed and we follow the people that we like and agree with. That's probably never going to change. I wish it would. I wish we were all better, but that's different than what's available in grammar school and elementary school, high school in a state like Florida. What if they never learn a thing to begin with? You're living not only in a right-wing media world, but in a right-wing school world too.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, you try and give the fuller perspective. I mean, my social media experience is a lot different than most because I spend most of my time in the right-wing dark corners of the internet with some of those people. So, but I also consume all the left wing stuff too. So I definitely feel like it's probably very difficult for a right winger to debate me because I really know all their arguments that they're going to make before they even make them, so.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about, what happened in, what was it? What year was it when it was during the pandemic, I guess, when you resigned? I mean, I don't have this in my notes. You were appointed first by former Republican Governor Rick Scott and then by Ron DeSantis to what role in government? And then why did you quit?
Yeah, well, I served on a number of they appointed me to a committee that chooses judges for Florida called the Judicial Nominating Committee. So I was appointed twice by Scott, once by DeSantis until I quit. But I held a number of other roles. I was president of the Republican Club in Sarasota, big Republican club, reelected twice. I served as general counsel of the party. So I had a number of different roles within the Republican Party of Florida. So yeah, until 2020. And really what did it for me, I never could stand Trump. I never voted for Trump. Okay. So I just voted none of the above in 2016. And I sort of checked out a lot, I stopped going to the meetings, all that kind of stuff when he became president. And really, it was the pandemic and being forced to watch those COVID briefings that he was giving every day that really just infuriated me and pushed me over the edge.
What was it? Anything in particular specifically? Did you, lose anybody during that time to COVID? What?
No, it was just the insanity of it. None of us at that time, I mean, I'm talking about like February, March of 20, really knew how bad it was going to be. It seemed like it was really bad and really dangerous. And I was watching these briefings and I was wanting health information. I really wanted to hear from Birx and Fauci, and I wanted to hear from the doctors and the scientists. But this buffoon would get up there and all the doctors and scientists are standing behind him. And, he'd ramble for 2 hours about North Korea and Russia, and this and that. And I'm just like, throwing things at the TV. And it was my first time I really got a real heavy dose of Trump because I kind of tuned him out before. And I was just so repulsed and really I didn't fully understand how much the rank and file grassroots of the party had changed during those 4 years. Because I hadn't been going to the meetings and stuff. And really, when I plugged back into that scene, I was really shocked by how much just the average Republican person at a Republican event had changed under Trump.
Is there anything that you can specifically say caused that, or any kind of characteristic that you're talking about? It's just so weird to imagine. I can't really relate to you in this way, in that you are part of the Republican Party in Florida and then they all leave you and you kind of stay there. There's a lot of people like that. A lot of people that you've become friends with, I know, like that. Charlie Sykes and
Sure.
So many more. So what happened? How do you diagnose that?
Diagnose as far as like what happened?
What changed there? Like why did those people go one way and you and others stay more principled and consistent, do you think?
Yeah, I think because we don't, people like the people you mentioned, Sykes, let's say Rick Wilson, Tim Miller, there's a lot of former Republicans that are on social media.
S.E. Cupp, I mean,
you can go on and on. There's so many of us. And I think we all share sort of a common thread in that we're traditional, old school conservatives. We're institutionalists. We believe in the institutions of government and non-government institutions. We believe that they need to be preserved and protected. We believe in the Constitution, this kind of thing. And, the other people in the party just believe in winning. And they're willing to abandon what they believe in, their principles, in a second, if it means acquiring power and winning an election. And so I think that that's the difference between us, is that I think we had a very clear-eyed view of who Donald Trump was, what he represented. He didn't represent what we believed in. The best way to illustrate this is now, if I walked into a Republican club meeting here in Sarasota where there'd be 300 or 400 people there, I could bring up the name Mitt Romney or John McCain and everyone would jeer and boo. And then I could look at all of them and say, I was here when they were the nominees for president in 2004, 2008, 2012. You loved them. You cheered them on. You supported these people. So now you hate them. Why do you hate them? Because Donald Trump told you to hate them. So it's not me that's changed. I feel the same way about John McCain and Mitt Romney as I felt back then. But they now hate them, even though they loved them back then.
I probably should ask you if I could, if you don't want to answer this, that's fine. But I wonder what you've had to deal with. Just one kind of personalist question. We've all been people have been targeted in different ways. I wonder if you or your family have been targeted by, anybody, much less Florida Republicans, your old friends, because listen, you're a tough guy. You're a Marine. You're a cop. You probably got guns. You're a big dude. But that, if somebody wants to hurt you or your family, they could. And you might not want to be so outspoken. You've been so effective as almost anybody out there at really creating problems for very powerful, influential people like Ron DeSantis, Trump, and so many others. So I could certainly see people wanting to at least shut you up, Ron. Have there been any or many threats?
Sure. Yeah, of course. And I knew that. I knew that going in. I knew that when I made my first video back in March of 2020 for Bill Kristol's group, which is now called Republican Accountability Project. Yeah. Back then it was called Republican Voters Against Trump. I made a video for them that they turned into a commercial. They put my face on billboards around Florida. So yes, I knew at the time, sure, I got plenty of threats, I got emails, letters. They bombarded my business. I was a practicing lawyer at the time, criminal defense lawyer. They'd post all kinds of horrible Google reviews on my business page, all that kind of stuff. Sure. And I'm very exposed here. Sarasota has become, many articles have been written about it, the MAGA capital of the world. We've got Bannon has a house here, Michael Flynn, Charlie Kirk, Ben Shapiro. I could go on and on and on. The cyber ninjas, Trump media is here. So there's so many. It's become such a right wing town, which it was not before Trump. And so, sure, I can tell you, it makes me want to really drop off the grid. It makes me want to move, which I am going to move. I deleted my Google business page. So yeah, there's certainly a lot of repercussions that come with this. But I don't care. Let the chips fall where they may.
Anything really serious other than that, where someone was more than an unhinged anonymous keyboard warrior?
No, just people threatening me with texts, emails. They mail me letters. I get those all the time.
But that's nice. I think it's nice to get a letter. It's nice to get a letter in the mail, though, even if it's a threat. It's look, an actual letter.
An actual letter. They send me actual handwritten letters. I just ignore it all. I don't report any of it. Because I just find that the thing that aggravates them the most is to ignore them, which is also why I don't engage with right wingers on Twitter, people say all the time, if you don't tag somebody, you're a coward. I'm not afraid of any of these people. I don't tag them because I have no desire to get into Twitter debates with right wingers. It's pointless. It solves no purpose. So I'm not on there for them, and I'm not on there to debate them. And that's why I do a lot of screenshots. But the other reason why I do that is because I don't want to crash the people who follow me on Twitter. I don't want to crash them into these crazy right wing accounts.
Right.
And that's what happens.
Yeah, that's an interesting. I actually love those arguments. They give me life, but we're different. No, I think you're right though on the ethics and on the effect of it. It's not really an effective thing to be doing, and so probably shouldn't do it. One of the, I guess, criticisms of you is that you give sound and light to the views of Trump and all the rest. How do you handle it when people say that to you? Like, well, you're platforming them, Ron.
Yeah, well, that's the most, common complaint I get from people on the left, especially. But I think that that was much more common 2 years ago. But I think now people really get it now. They get it a lot more in terms of that ignoring this guy, deplatforming him, so-called, didn't work. And it's not going to work. And the reason, and I said it wasn't going to work back then. And the reason why it doesn't work is I think what happened is in 2016, the media loved the ratings that the Trump drama brought in for them. Their ratings went through the roof in 16. They got addicted to that. They gave him way too much oxygen. They were covering his speeches, wall to wall, his events wall to wall, letting him say whatever he wanted. I think that's a huge mistake. But then I think they overcompensated and thought, well, we just won't talk about him or cover him at all, and he'll go away. And what I know is that what a lot of really Democrats, frankly, don't know is that the right wing has created over the last 5-6 years a huge media ecosystem of podcasters and networks and internet programs that have millions and millions of viewers and subscribers. They don't need us to platform them. They don't need CNN to platform them. They get their message out to their people all they want. What I do is expose the insanity and the craziness and the hypocrisy and the stupidity in small doses and make the general public aware of it.
Yeah. And now you're editor-in-chief of one of the most popular progressive media outlets. That's got to be weird for you. I mean, have your personal politics or ideology changed on the political spectrum from, I don't know what kind of conservative you were. You just said you said old-fashioned, old school conservative. So like, have you changed as well, or are you still a very conservative guy?
I think I've changed a little bit on some things. I mean, people evolve. They just do. And I probably evolved somewhat. I think being a criminal defense lawyer, I was originally like law enforcement, police, Marine, prosecutor, right? So at that time when I was probably 28, I probably was much more conservative than I am now. Once you become a criminal defense lawyer, you start working with people with mental illnesses, drug addicts, migrants, minorities, all people from all walks of life. And you're working with them every day trying to help solve their problems. And so you're really like a legal social worker when you're a criminal defense lawyer to a great degree. People think of it as like you're representing all these murder cases and stuff. Most criminal defense lawyers, their day-to-day work is just working with mentally ill drug addicts, who don't pay their bills or whatever. So, I think that makes you more empathetic. It makes you evolve in your thinking. It makes you think that, not everybody starts out at a level playing field in life. Some people have talents, because I used to be a big, up from the bootstraps kind of guy. Like everybody should be able to succeed in America, and there's no excuse if you don't. Right. But then once you work with a lot of people that struggle with a lot of problems and who are born into abusive parents and drug addicted parents, you see that, and they live in bad neighborhoods. You see that it's not a level playing field for everybody. So you become more empathetic. I will say I evolved a lot in my beliefs about, gay marriage, for example. I was against that back in the 80s and 90s. I'm certainly for that now.
You religious?
Views on abortion have changed, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Are you a religious guy?
I'm a Christian, sure. My wife is the children's director at our church. So yeah, I mean, I'm not very religious, but I am a Christian for sure. Yeah.
Have you done and thought a lot about this idea of Christian nationalism?
Well, sure. Absolutely. I mean, that's been a huge topic of my Twitter account for a long time. I mean,
forgive me for not knowing all of that, but I did a deep dive on you, and I think it's it's hard to figure out how much you've been involved with and what your thoughts are. So I think it's really important for people, I've learned from experts, I shouldn't say it's my opinion, that identify as Christian and that are as influential as you are, to combat the Christian nationalism thread. It's I think probably the best, the place where the fight most likely is to take place and be effective. Do you tell me a little bit about your thoughts on the threat and what your role in it, fighting it is?
I mean, watching how Donald Trump appropriated, the evangelical leaders in 2016 and how they made this deal with the devil to get their 3 Supreme Court justices really disgusted me. Yeah. I mean, because that was one of the big breaks for me with them and with Trump is just looking at them and saying, this guy, is the opposite of everything that you say you believe in. It embodies it in so many different ways. And yet you're willing to sell out what you've told us you believe deep in your heart and your soul to support this guy because you want to win and you want to ban abortion. And I just couldn't reconcile those things. So yes, I'm very against politics being in the church. In fact, the church that we belong to, that's the reason why we belong to it, is there is no politics in there. Zero, and I don't believe that the church should be used for political reasons. I don't think politics should be discussed in churches. And, so when I watch a lot of these faith leaders and evangelical leaders that are so heavily involved in politics, it repulses me because that's not really what Christianity is supposed to be about.
Yeah, I'm really glad to hear you talking about that. That's a really obviously important and interesting point of view. And so you also know really well the origin, apparently, of Moms for Liberty.
Sure.
There are these people I got to ask you about, the Zieglers are their names, and their relationship to and with Ron DeSantis, and the scandal that is unfolding there is fascinating. And all the players, and you've been not shy to be critical. The Moms for Liberty movement, I think most people know about, but tell me a little bit about who these people are. The Zieglers in Florida Republican politics, Christian and Bridget Ziegler, their relationship to the DeSantis. What's happening?
Yeah, in fact, the email that Christian Ziegler just sent out to trying to save his job to the Republican Party officials here in Florida singled me out specifically. He blamed me for his problems. He said,
let's get an exclusive reaction to that, Ron.
Yeah, he said, I spread it. He said I'm a left-wing, social media person, which is pretty funny because, he used to come to my Republican club when I was the president and stand in the back, but now I'm a left-wing radical. So yes, I know them well. I mean, I remember when they moved to Sarasota, or he did. I'm not really sure if she was already here or not, but I know he moved here. And she was never involved in politics. She had nothing to do with politics. In fact, he would typically always come to all the meetings, and, he was wanting to get to know all the power players and the movers and shakers in the community because that's what he wanted to do. I never saw her at any meetings. I mean, the first time I ever saw her at a meeting was when he unveiled that his wife was going to run for school board out of the blue. And I think we were all a little surprised, like, well, why aren't you running? You're the political person. I've never seen her before at a political event. So I think that, that really what has happened is I think they were just normal Republicans at that time. And somewhere along the way, they took this hard right turn into this social conservative, Ron DeSantis, MAGA world of declaring war on the schools, the groomers, the LGBTQ, which he's called gay people. They both called gay people perverts number of times, wanting to ban any book in any library that has anything to do with gay stuff. So yeah, then this stuff hits and you're just like, it's the height of hypocrisy. It really is. It's
let me just read from the Daily Beast opinion piece from Michael Daly. Whether or not the allegations that Florida GOP head Christian Ziegler raped a Sarasota woman 2 months ago are substantiated, there will remain an affidavit that the police submitted to secure a search warrant for his phone. And this sworn document attests that Ziegler's wife, Bridget, acknowledged that she and her husband had consensual sex with this woman a year ago. So just to be clear, fine, they're in a throuple. Who cares? Except for Bridget Ziegler is a Moms from Liberty person preaching against LGBT people while actually in a sexual relationship with a woman. And we could maybe hold the rape allegations aside because I don't really know about that and don't want to talk about it. But still, this is the height of hypocrisy for her to be obviously being anti-gay and then being privately gay. Although, Ron, I think Republicans, if you could put the Wonder Woman lasso of truth around them, would say they're anti-men having sex with men, but God loves women having sex with women, especially if we think they're attractive. That's fine.
Yeah, huge difference. I think if this had been a three-way with another guy, I think Christian would already be gone and be living in Costa Rica.
Right.
Yeah. The only thing that makes this somewhat palatable to some Republicans like Matt Gaetz, who's defending him, is the fact that it was a woman. Yeah. So, but look, even setting aside the rape, which I absolutely believe that happened, but setting that aside, even what Christian admitted to doing shows that these are just horrible people and horrible hypocrites. I mean, what he admitted to doing, first of all, this wasn't just a one-time thing. This was apparently a long-term relationship. There were apparently other women involved too, as well, that they had relationships with, that they brought in. This had been going on for years. Okay, so this is just the tip of the iceberg right now. There's going to be more coming. But what he admitted to doing was she told him not to come. He admits that, but he shows up at her house. She's getting ready to leave to go walk her dog, and he pushes her back inside, bends her over the bar stool and rapes her and films himself doing it. Okay, so there's a bunch of different stories about why he filmed it. Okay, a bunch of different reasons. Some of them, I won't repeat yet, but I mean, I've heard them, and they're pretty crazy. But the bottom line is he filmed it. Why did he film it? And then he deleted it. Why did he delete it?
Is it legal to film sex without consent of the partner in Florida or anywhere?
Well, that's a complicated question.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. I mean, it can be illegal. It kind of depends, but Florida, the laws are pretty liberal on that stuff.
Okay. So, I mean, it's a crazy situation that he is in, and yet apparently he's always had a good relationship with DeSantis. Now, the governor, DeSantis, who's a disgrace himself, is saying that Christian Ziegler should resign from being the head of the Florida Republican Party. Is that right?
Yeah, he's called for it. The Senate president has, the Speaker of the House has, Rick Scott has. So literally all the power players know that this guy's got to be gone. But it's not up to them. It's up to the executive committee, the state committee, which is like 20 county chairs, and it takes a majority vote. And so as long as he can hang on to 11 or 12 of them, then he can hold on to his job. But I'm hearing that that's not looking good. They've called an emergency meeting for next week. And my guess is he'll be gone if he doesn't resign before then. But he really should resign before then.
It's a crazy story, and people should look into it. I haven't seen it getting a lot of attention, but when I was preparing to talk to you, I read more into it. So I also wanted to ask you, back in the summer, maybe June, July, whenever Ron DeSantis announced he was going to be going to officially run for president, he did it on Twitter, as you remember, Twitter Spaces. You were on Aaron Rupar's show, and the day he announced, you said you thought he had a pretty good chance. Have you changed your mind? Do you think Ron DeSantis still has a chance of nominee, or is he going to quit like many of the people running this campaign any day now?
I mean, his campaign has been a disaster. It's just been a clown show of incompetence. And see, what I felt was that the more people got, as Roger Stone once said about Ron DeSantis, Roger Stone said, to know Ron DeSantis is to hate Ron DeSantis, which is true. The more people get to know him, the more they despise him. And that's why over the years, you can look back to his years in Congress or his years in the governor's mansion. He can't keep staff. I mean, it's a constant turnover. Nobody wants to work for this guy more than 6 months or a year. It's a revolving door of staff. So he's an ass. He's just a jerk to work for. So I believe that would hurt him. But I also saw how much money he had, the organization, the plan. And I thought, well, he's got a legitimate shot. Plus, I believe Trump would be indicted and prosecuted and convicted at some point during the campaign, which would also bail out Ron DeSantis.
Right.
But I think the things that have hurt him are the emergence of Nikki Haley. Vivek running has peeled off some votes from him. Those two people are hurting him. And also his organization has been a disaster. Clearly the people he brought in were just blood-sucking leeches who just wanted to make it rip off as much campaign money as they could before heading out the door. And that's what's been happening.
Well, sometimes we think too much about the analysis. And Ron DeSantis, and you said this during that interview. And I think that sometimes we think too much. And I think that one of Ron DeSantis, I'm being funny, but also dead serious, one of Ron DeSantis' big problems, and you said this to some extent, is his face. He doesn't know how to use his face and his body and his life force. He doesn't know how to be. And that makes people, regardless of his experience, his credibility, his policy choices, his rhetoric, it just makes people think, there's something wrong with that guy. He doesn't know what to do with his face and stuff. How much of that do you think is actually part of the problem?
There's been a lot of speculation for years in Florida that he has Asperger's or some sort of problem in terms of, and this goes back to old stories you can read about him in college, him just not being able to have a lot of interpersonal skills, not being a friendly guy, not smiling very much, not laughing very much. So, there's always been that undercurrent. But, what we saw in Florida was every event he ever did was very carefully orchestrated and scripted. It was the same format every single time. Nobody was allowed near him who disagreed with him. And in that environment, he does well. Okay. But I figured once he got out of that protective bubble that he has here in Florida, and he has to interact with people like off the cuff and do interviews with a variety, that he would really have a hard time with that. And, the thing that I've done to sort of aggravate him is also focus on those kind of things that get under his skin, like his hair and his heels, his high heels. And people gave me a hard time about that stuff at first, when I first started doing it on the left, saying I was being superficial, but I was doing it because I know how much it bothers.
No, I think I disagree with that, because I think that it is superficial, but like if you care about such things, that's the problem. And people like him try to purvey this personality of tough guy, and I wear cowboy boots and all this shit, but and he was in the military and everything. It seems like but you were actually soft and fake, and people should call out your hypocrisy when you're pretending to be someone that you're not. I think. Yep. Exactly. I agree with that.
It shows his insecurity. Why can't you be comfortable in your own skin? People who aren't comfortable in their own skins becoming political leaders, very dangerous people.
Yeah. The Politico profile of you is interesting. Did you like that profile, by the way?
Well, it got me in hot water with a few people that I was critical of. But yeah, I mean, I guess so. It was accurate. It was very accurate. They followed me around, I think, for 8 hours or so.
Yeah, it was really interesting to read that. But they refer to you as like the top anti-DeSantis, I don't know, commentator, pundit, whatever they refer to you. I don't have the exact quote. But my question to you is, what does Ron DeSantis think and know of you? Have you spent time with him? Does he must hate you?
Yeah, I know he hates me, but no, I think he really tries to ignore me. People have brought it up before, and he really tries to brush it off. Doesn't when he doesn't like somebody, he doesn't mention them by name.
Right.
Like he will never. He went 2 years without saying the word Trump. he literally never said the word Trump for like 2 years. So that's what he does. I mean, it's sort of his passive aggressive way to deal with a headache or a thorn, is to sort of act like they're not bothering them. But that's okay. All of his people despise me, badmouth me constantly. All of his campaign people I'm talking about, blocked me. Christina Pushaw, his communications director, despises me.
I tangled with her once. She ruined me.
But
she really got me good. Like, I was getting trounced for like days. I was like, I wish I hadn't said anything. That lady is effective.
She's vicious. Yeah, she's vicious. But I'm more so. So
yeah,
they stopped tangling me. Plus, the other thing that really, really bothered them was that I allied with a lot of the Trump online people that were doing all the anti-DeSantis stuff for Trump. I allied myself with them in sort of a marriage of convenience, a temporary marriage of convenience, just to go after DeSantis. And that bothered the hell out of them. The fact that I was working with some of the Trump people to go after DeSantis.
Sure. Well, no, common, enemies create common bedfellows or something like that. But let me just ask you the one kind of maybe not evergreen question, because I want this interview with the great Ron Filipowski to stand the test of time forever. But I wonder what your analysis is of the campaign, where we're at right now here at early December, because Trump's legal problems, we've got another debate coming up. But if you care about polling, who knows? But I sometimes wonder if maybe he doesn't get the nomination. But you are a MAGA whisperer. Do you think there's any chance, Ron Filipowski, that Donald Trump doesn't get the nomination, even with all of his legal court trials starting?
No, I think he will get the nomination. I've always thought that. But I will say this. I think that if the field is cleared and we get in a 1-to-1 matchup before Super Tuesday with like Haley versus Trump, I think she would have at least a shot to give him a run for his money. See, we don't even necessarily need someone else to beat Trump, because all it would take is somebody like a Haley or a DeSantis to win a primary in 1 or 2 states, and he'll come completely unglued because he thinks that that's not possible, which it is possible. It's still possible in Iowa and South Carolina with Haley. But it's still a long shot. No, I think he'll win. But the elephant in the room and what, the odd thing is you can't get any of the MAGA or Republican people to even talk about or consider the possibility that Trump is going to be convicted in April in D.C. and could be in jail. I mean, you can't get one of them, one Trump supporter, to even put that in their head that could happen. They're in complete denial.
Yeah, I wonder if that would change. It's a real hypothetical, but I haven't really seen too many legal analysts say that jail is a real possibility before the election. But you happen to be a legal expert, so do you really think that he could get sentenced? Because there's a guilty verdict that could come in May or something, and then there's a sentencing, and then there's time periods. You know how it all works. Do you really think he could be actually imprisoned before the election?
Yeah, because I think that Judge Chutkan is not fooling around.
Right.
I think that she is determined to get this case resolved completely, trial, sentencing, everything as soon as possible before the election. I think the Atlanta case is going to get delayed until after. I think his friendly Judge Cannon down in Florida is going to delay that case. The New York case is delayed. But the D.C. case is going to go. I think it's going to go to trial in March as planned. I think that trial will wrap up by the end of April. I think he will be convicted. He could then go into jail while he awaits his sentencing, which, most defendants go to jail after they're convicted at trial while they're waiting for sentencing. So the fact that he wouldn't, right there, he's getting a break that most people don't get. But no, I think he's going to lose. I think he's going to be convicted, and I think he's going to be sentenced to prison all before the election. But that is not something that you can get any Trump supporter to even acknowledge. They don't even consider that possible. So they haven't wrapped their head around it.
I guess why would you want, if they did acknowledge it, what do you think that would even mean to them? I mean, the point is, would they not still vote for their own David Koresh?
No, I mean, the hardcore MAGA base will, yes, but that's 40% of the Republican Party.
Right.
there's still a 60% of the Republican Party who, is going to vote for Trump if he's the nominee because they want to win. But, they'd prefer somebody else. All the polls show that. So I think that if those voters really knew for sure that Trump would be convicted before the election, I think many of them would be much less likely to support him now. But they don't think that it's going to happen.
Yeah, well, Judge Shuckin, you're right. I've nicknamed her just now to Judge Zero Fuckin. You can use that, Ron. You can use that because it seems like she is really has none to give at this point. She is going hard, in her public statements and decisions, saying he's not a king, he's not president. It's not how it works.
Treat him just like everybody else. Yeah, absolutely. Because he hasn't been treated like everybody else up to this point.
You've been following and covering, doing a real good job with this James Comer and the impeachment efforts. And it's really interesting because your analysis is that a lot of Republicans in Congress are resigning. They don't really want to impeach him because they don't think they have the evidence. They think it's hurting them in a way. Maybe I'm getting your analysis wrong. They want to run out the clock and then they won't be in the chairmanship and James Comer won't be investigating using the Oversight Committee and its abilities to investigate Joe Biden. But I mean, I also think is it hurting them is my question. James Comer and these embarrassing allegations that keep backfiring, and even right wing people like Cat Turd and others are being like Steve Bannon being critical of him when Hunter Biden called his bluff and said he would testify publicly. What do you make of James Comer, the Oversight Committee, and the overall effort to impeach Biden? Is the question I tried to get to 17 fucking minutes ago when I started talking.
It's a disaster for them. I mean, you've got Trump breathing down their neck, pushing this impeachment for his own purposes. But I think that they understand, the leadership of the House understands that if this is what they spend their time doing over the next 9 months, they're going to get wiped out in November because they already have accomplished nothing their first year in the majority. Nothing. They've passed nothing substantive that's passed the Senate and been signed by the president. Nothing at all. And so if they then go into
that's according to Chip Roy.
Yeah, that's according to anybody who will tell the truth on the Republican side. So, I mean, they just can't point to anything other than renaming some post offices. So if they then launch into impeachment over, car payments, a loan for cars, they only have, with Santos being ejected, they only have a 3-seat majority now. And then Johnson from Ohio is going to next week is leaving to take a state university president job. So he's leaving. McCarthy, everyone's saying McCarthy's gone. McCarthy's going to leave around Christmas or before. Lots of people that know him are saying that. That puts them at a 1-seat majority. So they've got to try and hang on to that when they're going to spend the next year on some ridiculous impeachment. So Johnson knows he's not going to be speaker next year if this is what they spend their time doing. But the MAGA base is demanding it. So this is the This is the push-pull that always happens in the Republican Party. The base wants them to go full crazy. They have plenty of members in very safe districts that also want to go crazy. But the leaders of the party understand that if we go down that road, we're committing suicide politically.
Yes, exactly that. The base wants them to go crazy. I mean, I wrote a piece a million years, I don't write much, ago in the Daily Beast about, I heard a radio interview with right-wing nutjob Mark Levin and right-wing nutjob Senator, probably the most conspiratorial of them all, Ron Johnson, Wisconsin Senator. And they were yelling at each other, Ron. I'll never forget, because the radio guy who is not in government, has no consequences but to get ratings and divide people, is screaming at the right-wing senator, why don't you, whatever it was, stand up to or shut down the government over Obamacare? I think Obama was president. And Ron was like, we're in the minority. We can't do that. And it's basically an actual example of what you're illustrating. The base wants them to go crazy. The radio guys are screaming. But in fact, in government, in this case, the impeachment is hurting them. The things that they can or can't do are not realistic to what the Sean Hannitys of the world are demanding.
And James Comer has really lost his support with these people because
has he
promised them big things. You know, he promised them big things all last year.
Right.
He said, I'm going to be the oversight chair next year when we're in the majority. And I'm going to get Joe Biden. I'm going to impeach Joe Biden. And I've got the proof and I've got the goods. And I can't tell you what it is now, but I've got it. And I watched interview after interview. He was on Maria Bartiromo's show every other week saying what he was going to do when he became oversight chair. And so these people believed him. And here we are 1 year later, and he's rolling out $4,000 truck payments. And I can tell you the MAGA people are pretty disgusted with James Comer because they believe that the evidence is there, but he is too incompetent to be able to present it properly.
How much are you concerned about third parties, specifically what I think is the biggest threat, no labels? Have you pounded them into the ground yet, Ron, with your massive empire of influence?
No, because I've had people ask me to do that, but first of all, I don't do anything like that. So pack or group, hey, blast this out for me. I don't do that.
If people ask you to do those things, they must ask you all the time because you have and try to pay you, I'm sure.
The reason why I have the following I have is because I don't do that.
Right.
I'm not a sellout. I won't sell out to anybody at any price. So, there's just, I just won't do those kind of advocacy things on behalf of PACs and all that kind of stuff. So no, really what I've kind of done is held my fire on that to kind of wait and see how it plays out and to see how it's going to break. Like, for example, Liz Cheney right now is running as a third party. So you have to immediately ask yourself, like, well, who is that going to hurt? Same thing with RFK Jr. People assume because he's a Kennedy, he's going to hurt, Biden, but he's hugely popular in the far right conspiracy theorists, some of whom may be disillusioned with Trump. So we don't always know how these things are going to break, because I personally think what Liz Cheney would do is hurt Trump much more, because she's going to siphon off a lot of those establishment Republicans that won't vote for Joe Biden, but they also don't like Trump. So that kind of gives them a place to go. What
do you say of progressives, Democrats, whatever, think that Joe Biden should step down right now? Let somebody else run.
What do you think about I've not made it a secret that I wanted somebody else to run. I've said that before. I just felt like I never expected him to run for a second term. I always thought he was going to be a one-termer.
Yeah.
I thought he was inheriting a huge mess that he had to clean up. Global inflation, supply chain. People forget, the height of the pandemic, how bad everything was, unemployment through the roof. And he had to clean up that mess. And I understood that he, as the president, was going to take the blame for having to fix all those problems. And his approval rating was going to suffer. But I said to myself, well, it's not going to matter because he's not going to run again. He's not going to run at 82. So he can take all the slings and arrows and take the blame. And then a Gavin Newsom or a Christine Whitmer or somebody like that is going to come along fresh and start over. But, I think that he has come to the conclusion, that he feels like he is the best person to defeat Trump. I don't know if that's true or not, but my own position is if that's what he chooses to do, he's the incumbent president. We have to support him, and that's it.
Last question for you, which is the one I've really saved to the end and really didn't see as much about when I prepped for you. And this is the thing that I always am really most curious about with people like yourself and some of the other people we mentioned earlier, former Republicans. You're now a registered Democrat, is my understanding, right?
Yep.
I've been covering politics and paying attention to it for about 15 years. And one of the real, I guess, crucible events or moments in my life that got me into it was living and working in Manhattan on 9/11, knowing people who died, and then watching, our America's reaction to that over the years, and thinking a lot about national security, talking to experts, journalists, military folks, national security folks for years. And I guess what I always wonder, and I always want to ask former Republicans, certainly a guy like yourself who's a Marine, like, how did that not seal the deal for you? Forget about healthcare, economics, the culture war. How did the Bush administration's invasion of Iraq how did you not reject that at the time? How did you not reject the Republican Party at the time as a result of that alone is what I really want to know. And I haven't seen you talk about that.
Well, because that's a really huge question. I mean, it's hard to talk about that, go back to that time period in a vacuum. I mean, it's a big discussion as far as the Iraq War, the Afghanistan, going into Afghanistan, all of that stuff.
But just Iraq, just that decision. Just
Iraq. I think that there are arguments that can be made, could have been made. I mean, the WMD thing, I never believed. Okay, I guess we could start there. I mean, this is a huge discussion, but yeah. I never believed that WMDs existed, and I never believed that that was the real reason why Bush and Cheney wanted to go into Iraq. I think that their real reason was because they felt like removing Saddam Hussein was absolutely crucial. And one thing I never hear anybody talk about when they have these discussions is, what if we hadn't? Where would the Middle East be? Where would Iraq be? Where would Iran be? If Saddam Hussein, let's say, was still running that country.
I have a pretty good answer.
Nobody ever talks about that.
I have a pretty good answer to that, and I want to know what your reaction, and I won't belabor it too long. I'm happy to hear your thoughts.
It's a big, long debate.
Well, here's the thing that I find really the most important point about that is simply that the people I talked to then, and a lot of even neocons, and Cheney at one point after the first Gulf War even said this and knew this. Everybody said, a lot of smart people I talked to that were not progressives, they weren't, because they understood the region. They said, if you get rid of Saddam, you will remove the check on Iran. And that's exactly what happened. And now a lot of Iraqis who even fought, or their parents did, a long war with Iran and millions died, are favorable to Iran. So like getting rid of Saddam, the answer to what would happen is, we know what would happen. We got rid of the check on Iran, and they have been a real nemesis, to say the least, ever since. What do you think of that argument?
Well, I don't know that having Saddam there over the last 20 years would have made that situation better. Yeah, maybe more of a check on Iran, more of a distraction for Iran, but what else would he have been doing over these last 20 years while running Iraq? Yeah. So I think that the Bushes were not, and the Cheneys were not honest with people about what their intention was. I think it's become clear in years later. What they wanted, what they thought was going to happen, was regime change, a democratic pro-U.S. government in Iraq there would be an Arab Spring that could transform the countries around them and turn the Middle East from a region that was hostile, that sponsored terrorism, into maybe even a pro-American region. I think that's what was in their head, even though they couldn't say that to the American public because nobody would have bought that argument. But I think that was their intent and that was their hope. It didn't really pan out that way. But so I think that was their real reason for going in there.
The only reason
so that's why, in terms of why didn't that was definitely not a deal breaker for me with the Republican Party. No,
I appreciate your answer on that. I really wanted to know what your thoughts were, especially given your background and your military service and so on. Ron, it has been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Oh, we didn't talk about your thoughts on comedy and the influence of Don Rickles has had on you. And I'm always obviously want to talk about comedy and comedians. So you mentioned that as one thing we could talk about that you probably don't often get the opportunity or asked about. So I definitely want to know your thoughts on just in general comedy's influence, because you're great on social media. You obviously have a great sense of humor. But what is it about Rickles or comedy in general that influences you and your work and your life?
Yeah, I mean, it is a good question, because I feel like and I really get a kick out of it when comics follow me on Twitter and interact with me, like Kathy Griffin and Tom Arnold and some others that I really like. But I think that what it is I cover a very dark topic for the left. In other words, I'm presenting the far right conspiracy theorist stuff to liberals who don't necessarily want to see it and want to hear it.
Yeah.
So if I didn't do that in the context of humor, as I did with James Comer last night, calling him Comer Pile and, all of that stuff, and the other thing is these people are incredibly fun. I mean, it's fun to make fun of them. Look at MAGA, George Santos, Kim Guilfoyle, Donald Trump Jr. These are funny people to laugh at and make fun of. But, so presenting it in a humorous way, because I was always a huge fan growing up of stand-up comedy and loved, and, Don Rickles was always my favorite growing up. And so, yeah, if you're familiar with Don Rickles' comedy and you follow me on Twitter, you can see, I think, the thread there of his style of comedy being injected into what I do politically.
Yeah, I love it. I love that aspect of what you're doing. Apparently, you're like Don Jr.'s biggest nemesis. Is that like, have you met that guy?
Yeah, he definitely is aware of me. And I'm probably like the only one who watches his podcast from who's not, MAGA.
You actually watch his entire podcast?
Yeah, and Guilfoyle too. Yeah, they're on twice a week. I watch it. Sure.
Are they on together?
I watch all these people. Yeah.
They on together? Do they do I didn't even know that.
No, they're separate. She comes on at 4:00 and he comes on at 6. So I do get a little bit of a break, which is nice. But sometimes I won't watch it live all the time. Sometimes I'll go back and watch it. But look, here's what I do with Junior. I'm mostly looking for, when he's on something. I can usually click on his podcast and look at his eyes for like 10 seconds and know, okay, this is a waste of time, or, oh, he's lit tonight.
Wait, now for you to make that insinuation, given what you know both about drugs, criminal justice, and the First Amendment, could possibly seem irresponsible, but you have the conviction that you have no problem saying that he's on drugs.
Well, he's on something. Okay. So yes, I mean, look, I'm not going to, be specific, but, I don't want to get sued either. But, what I can say, and I'm always very careful to let my followers make those comments and not me.
Right.
Relating to drug abuse speculation. But yes, I mean, when you're a criminal defense lawyer and you do drug cases, you're around drug addicts every single day. And I see them every single day in all stages of sobriety. Sometimes they're completely high when they walk into my office. Sometimes they're coming down. Sometimes they're going through withdrawals, So I see the difference. And so I can tell the difference between a Donald Trump Jr. interview when there's nothing going on and a Donald Trump Jr. interview when something's going on, and you can see it in his eyes, his mannerisms, his mouth. He does different things with his mouth and with his nose.
Right.
It's just pretty obvious to people who know what they're doing.
Do you have any compassion or sympathy for him?
I mean, I would say the only compassion or sympathy I have is probably his childhood. The fact that he probably had a pretty fucked up childhood with his dad, never paying attention to him, never do anything with him. Yeah. That's probably the only sympathy I would have for him. But I think back then he wasn't so bad, and he's talked about this too, that he was never a political person until his dad ran for president. I mean, Junior really wasn't involved in anything political at all. So I think he just, again, like we talked about with Christian Ziegler, he made this hard right turn into Crazyville.
I got to ask you, you're such a huge, I know I said last question, but you're such a huge influencer now. You have so many followers. And I know that, as you mentioned, you get a kick out of when certain, well-known comedians follow you. Just give me your favorite celebrity follow and story. I mean, not only they follow, you've gotten to know certain people. So just give me your favorite connection that you've made with a celebrity because you've become so big on social media and elsewhere now. What do you got? I know there's many. What do you got?
I mean, the Mark Hamill stuff, really, that a lot of people, really, everybody knows who Mark Hamill is, right? I'm going to say that my favorite one was when Tom Arnold posted that I was the funniest person on Twitter. And that was like really huge for me because I'm a big Tom Arnold fan. I just think he's hilarious. And, Roseanne Barr also, by the way, does not like me. She's very aware of who I am.
Well, you and Tom have that in common, I suppose.
But yes, I think he likes when I post the Roseanne clips. But yeah, I mean, I just really got off on that because I thought, I'm viewed as like this political person, a commentator on politics. So for Tom Arnold to say that, who I don't think he throws around compliments like that lightly.
No, no comedian does.
That I just thought coming from him, and I've seen his stand up and he's great.
Yeah.
I just thought coming from him, that was like such a huge compliment.
That's great. That's a great story. I'm sure there's a lot more. Ron, I really appreciate talking to you today. I know you're a super busy guy and a lot of demand. And so thanks for doing this. And I hope we get to do it again and someday meet in person, maybe not in Florida.
Okay. Sounds good, Pete.
Thanks, man.
Well, what did I tell you? What did you think? I love that conversation, particularly like the end there when I talked to him about being a Republican during and throughout the Iraq War. What did you think of his answer there? I might not agree with him and many other people, and you may not agree with me on everything. I think it's important that where we do have common ground, we work together to make a difference, and I think that's definitely what Ron has been doing with so many people, and I'm certainly happy to do it with him here. Thank you for doing it with me each and every day here on Stand Up. If you haven't signed up for a paid subscription, hey, maybe now is the time, because this is what I do, bumblebees, every day, sometimes more than once a day, and almost every day of the week. Please find it in your heart and wallet to support it with a paid subscription. Jon Carroll writes all the music for the show, and I'm so grateful that he does. Plays us in, plays us out. JonCarroll.org. Check him out, and I'll talk to you later with more. Look for my great conversation with Missouri's Jess Piper. I think you're going to love a lot coming later today.
To let in some light, you gotta stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You gotta stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. And even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense, and you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town, just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up. We got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up. You got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well, and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.